Hello and welcome to a new episode of Constructing Legends with the Violet Howler, a literary analysis of Voltron Legendary Defender. With shows that center around a team of main heroes, there's a tendency to assume that there is no one protagonist, that every member of the team is guaranteed to receive equal focus and screen time, or that all of them are equally important to the overarching plot simply because the team is in the title. But that isn't always the case. Even in an ensemble cast, the overarching plot threads will often be anchored around one or two main protagonists who receive the most focus and/or who everything ultimately ties back to. The title of the first Incredibles movie might refer to the whole family, but it's Mr. Incredible's desire to return to the glory days of being a superhero that drives the majority of the film's plot. In the Power Rangers franchise and its source material, the Super Sentai franchise, the Red Ranger is consistently treated as a focal point of each iteration's narrative. And Kingdom Hearts features multiple major characters across dozens of different games and time periods who all have their own adventures across Disney locales battling the forces of evil. But as I've talked about repeatedly in my Constructing Kingdoms videos, everything in the series ultimately ties back to the bond between Sora and Riku. And when you look at how the characters' arcs in Voltron move the overarching plot forward, the one who stands out as being that kind of anchor point for the series is Princess Allura.
We must fight, and keep fighting until we defeat Zarkon.
From the start, the show establishes that the Lions are connected to her life force, and she's the one who gives the team direction and purpose by determining which paladins are the best candidates for which Lion, as well as establishing their shared goal of defeating Zarkon. One of the biggest conflicts in Season 2 stems from how her trauma over the genocide of her people has left her suspicious and mistrustful of all Galra due to the actions of Zarkon and those loyal to him, to the point of being skeptical that the Blade of Marmora's intentions are genuine. She's the first one to encourage the team to move on from Shiro's disappearance and find a replacement Black Paladin, leading to the shuffling of the pilot roster in Season 3, and she serves as the primary leader of the rebel coalition they build up over the first half of the series. Much of the dramatic thrust of the team's alliance with Lotor in Seasons 5 and 6 is built around her burgeoning romance with him, and after their falling out in Season 6, she is the one who instigates their climactic fight with him. Then in the final season, she is the one who consistently pushes the team to pursue Onerva as a threat, and leads the charge in doing whatever it takes to bring the former Empress of the Galra down. While the fact that the show's premise positions it as being about the team as a whole is partly responsible for Allura's position as the primary protagonist not being widely recognized, I think that lack of knowledge of the storytelling pattern her arc follows is also a contributing factor. When audiences think of narrative frameworks, the one that comes to mind most often for many people is the hero's journey cycle by literature professor Joseph Campbell. However, the hero's journey, and Campbell's promotion of it as a universal model of the human experience, has been criticized for overlooking the experiences of other demographics that don't fit that mold. Which is why author Maureen Murdoch developed her own model known as the heroine's journey based on her work as a therapist for women. And it is this heroine's journey framework which most closely aligns with the trajectory of Allura's arc and the overall plot structure of Legendary Defender as a whole. So for today's video, I'll be detailing the stages of Murdoch's heroine's journey, how the show's narrative matches up with it, and how the editing of Season 8 damages it by cutting out the final stages of Allura's character arc.
Here we go.
I've talked about the heroine's journey a lot in my Kingdom Hearts videos, but for the benefit of those who are new to my channel and those who may need a refresher, let me first lay out a brief summary of how this framework is structured. As I've talked about in my previous videos, Murdoch's formula opens with what she calls the separation from the feminine and the identification with the masculine, where at the start of the narrative, the heroine either unconsciously neglects or actively represses the traits within herself that the audience associates with femininity and attempts to emulate traits that are considered masculine in order to achieve success and validation. Her behavior comes in reaction to cultural pressure attempting to push her into a specific rigid box that she's attempting to reject. These phases are also where the heroine gathers allies who will help her work toward her external goal, and superficially corresponds to the early steps of the hero's journey, where the protagonist accepts the call to adventure and meets allies or a mentor who provide them with aid. From there, the heroine embarks on the Road of Trials, a stage which is pretty self-explanatory, and which superficially resembles the tests, allies, and enemies phase of Campbell's hero's journey. This culminates in the heroine achieving her boon of success, which often resembles the final stages of the hero's journey, where the protagonist achieves the goal of their quest and settles down to live happily ever after. But in a heroine's journey that is only the middle of the story rather than the end, typically occurring somewhere between the end of the first act or the middle of the second in a 3-act structure. Because the heroine has put so much focus up to this point on her external goal that she has failed to meaningfully resolve her underlying motivations for seeking that goal in the first place. And by sacrificing parts of herself in order to achieve her external goal, the heroine cuts herself off from her full potential and inhibits her ability to achieve her goal. As a result of this, her boon of success ultimately proves itself to be hollow and temporary, as new challenges arise which her over-reliance on masculine-coded traits has failed to prepare her for, referred to by Murdoch's outline as the awakening to feelings of spiritual aridity. Following the loss of her boon, the heroine is compelled to finally look inward, examine the causes of her inner turmoil, and recognize that she needs to face them in order to move forward and heal. This is referred to as the initiation and descent to the goddess phase, and is followed by what Murdoch refers to as healing the mother-daughter split, where the heroine gains a new perspective on her feminine-coded traits that helps her find a better way to resolve her inner conflict. After that is the healing the wounded masculine stage, where the protagonist reconciles with her masculine-coded traits, sometimes personified by a figure from Jungian psychology called the animus, by learning to distinguish between the positive and negative aspects of those traits. And finally, the heroine's journey ends with the integration of masculine and feminine, also referred to as the union, where the heroine finally achieves balance between the different aspects of herself and moves forward into the future. Now, to illustrate how the heroine's journey ties into Allura's arc, let me start with a quick history lesson on how Allura was portrayed in the original 80s cartoon. In the first Voltron series, all of the authority figures in Allura's life were against her flying the Blue Lion and fighting on the front lines of their war with Zarkon specifically because of her gender. Her childhood nanny reacted to her first flight in the Blue Lion by spanking her in public, while the other pilots, all of whom are dudes, laugh at the scene, and then the nanny goes off to find a suitable man to fill the empty spot left in the pilot roster after Sven's departure. Then when the next attack from Zarkon's forces comes, Karan ties Allura up and locks her in her bedroom to physically prevent her from getting to the Blue Lion. In the modern series, nobody outright opposes the idea of Allura piloting a lion herself, and when they object to her doing something, her gender is never used as a reason why she shouldn't do it. But even with the change in language, the core thread of Allura being consistently treated by those around her as uniquely vulnerable in a way that others aren't, and her resisting the role of the sheltered damsel who relies on others to fight her battles, is still there in Legendary Defender. From the many instances of Karan protesting whenever Allura leaves the castle to go into a dangerous situation, despite the fact that she isn't the only one in danger, and the fact that her decisions in those instances typically prove to ultimately be necessary and correct in the end, to the times that the Paladins expect an authority figure like Shiro or Karan to overrule her decisions when she insists on taking those risks, as if they have any say in what she does. And those patterns did not stop after she became a Paladin. So Allura's separation from the feminine and identification with the masculine occur when she starts the series pushing to take action and have an active role in the war against Zarkon, instead of sitting helplessly on the sidelines. It's pretty clear from the 3-part pilot episode that this desire stems from her survivor's guilt over the loss of her people. Because in that first flashback depicting her backstory, we see her eager to fight for the survival of their people, but her father took that choice away from her, and instead, to her mind, she spent millennia sleeping while her entire culture and countless others were wiped out. And that belief that she isn't doing enough unless she's taking an active role is made much more explicit when she tries to become a Lion pilot in Season 3, Episode 2, Red Paladin.
How can I allow others to risk their lives in battle, and not be prepared to do so myself? Please, I must do this. Others are risking their lives in this fight, and I can't continue to...
But by treating the role of a frontline fighter as the most significant way she can contribute to the war effort, she implicitly devalues her other skills and abilities because they aren't as focused on action and frontline combat. As an Altean alchemist, she is the heroic counterpart to the villainous witch Hagar, with incredibly powerful magical abilities that allow her to counteract Hagar's dark magic, essentially teleport spacecraft across vast interstellar and intergalactic distances, infuse giant robots with energy to allow travel outside reality, and heal living things that are on the brink of death, if not already dead, up to and including bringing entire universes back to life after Unnerva destroyed them in the finale. But she cannot make effective use of those abilities when she's stuck in the cockpit of a lion, unless she wants to jump out and leave the team unable to form Voltron until she's done working her magic. So even though her gender is never explicitly brought into it, Allura is still subtextually identifying with the masculine by pushing to be a paladin because she's treating a role that society has historically seen as one occupied by men as the most meaningful way she can contribute. But her separation from the feminine and identification with the masculine goes beyond just wanting to be more involved on the front lines of the fight. It also extends to her stubborn refusal to unpack and address the underlying trauma of her planet's destruction and the loss of her people that's at the root of her motivations. Because as I've talked about in one of my Kingdom Hearts videos, open displays of emotional vulnerability are associated with femininity and a lack of masculinity in a lot of cultures, such as the United States, where the show was made.
Guys don't talk to guys about guy problems. We just punch each other on the shoulders.
That's stupid.
To a girl, to a guy, that's like 6 months of therapy.
And throughout the series, Allura insists on burying her feelings and being stoic for the sake of morale so that others can rely on her.
I must portray strength, so no one can tell how concerned I am about the fate of our mission.
Sorry, Princess. I know how much you wanted to pilot the Red Lion.
I'm fine. Let's move on. It's silly. I used to think that the team relied on me, that I needed to be strong for everyone else.
She never allows herself the chance to properly unpack and sit with her grief, instead bottling it all up so she can focus on being there for everyone else around her. Even though the series has demonstrated on multiple occasions that her magical abilities are tied to her emotions. And because she resists processing her grief, she inhibits her ability to truly achieve lasting peace in the universe and regain the connection to her home that was taken from her. Which is ultimately what causes her to lose her boon of success after multiple major victories over the first half of the series. Because in her anger over Zarkon's betrayal, his destruction of her home planet, and his murder of her father, Allura starts out the series blaming the entire Galra species for her losses. She's hostile toward the Blade of Marmora in Season 2 despite their shared opposition to Zarkon, because in her mind, any genuinely good Galra would have already stopped Zarkon by now. And though she later warms up to Colovan and his faction as trustworthy, and gets over her hang-ups around Keith being half Galra, her interactions with Lotor in the first episode of Season 5 imply that she just internalized them as exceptions to the rule.
And yet you still look at me...
As if you were the leader of the most bloodthirsty race of murderers this universe has ever known.
Meanwhile, her interactions with the alternate reality Altean Empire in Season 3 show that Allura has put her own people and culture on a pedestal as paragons of goodness and justice. Because in Season 3, Episode 4, Hole in the Sky, where the team visits an alternate universe where Altea was never destroyed, she's so overjoyed to be among her people again that she ignores the blatant red flags that this version of her planet isn't the utopia she imagines it is. And even after finding out that the Alteans of this reality built an empire that runs on stripping people of their free will and using them as slave labor, she still tries to cling to that idealized view of her people. She only admits that the Alteans of this universe aren't the good guys after she hears the Imperial Altean scientist openly declare his intent to torture that universe's version of Slav the same way that the Galra tortured the Slav in her universe. But even then, she still clings to the idea that Alteans as a whole are inherently good by arguing that General Hira and her allies are not true Alteans.
You're no empress of mine.
And you're no Altean.
Allura's Road of Trials takes up most of the first half of the show. And though there are multiple victories during this phase that could potentially qualify, I would argue that her true boon of success is achieved at the end of Season 4, when her efforts as a paladin and a leader to assemble a rebel alliance culminated in a coordinated assault by Voltron and their allies that seized a third of the Empire's territory in a single strike. But this didn't bring an end to the war. Not only because Emperor Zarkon was still alive, but because even when he does die a couple episodes later, his death doesn't make the Galra Empire magically collapse without his leadership like Keith expected when he impulsively charged at Zarkon in the Season 1 finale. Because Zarkon's death doesn't solve the reason why the Galra as a people are conquering planets in the first place. That, as I've talked about in previous videos, their entire civilization is dependent on a continuous source of quintessence. But on top of that, Allura and her allies' dialogue in the first 5 seasons of the series makes it clear that they had no real plan for what comes after the war. They talk about dismantling the Galra Empire, but never once in the series does anyone, not even the Blade of Marmora, ever bring up what Galra civilization will look like in the aftermath, or what place the Galra as a people will have in post-war galactic society. Even as she and the Paladins fight to free more planets from oppression at the hands of the Empire, they never give any indication of when they'll consider the war over. And in fact, Season 8 shows the coalition that she built going out of their way to attack a random Galra base pretty much just because they see any Galra military presence on a planet as inherently hostile regardless of context. Because in Season 8, Episode 3, The Prisoner's Dilemma, there was no innocent native population being oppressed on planet Riker. Just a small group of Galra that were trying to make a life for themselves and survive on an otherwise uninhabited planet after their civilization collapsed. But the first thing that the Paladins do when they arrive is demand those Galra immediately surrender. Then after the battle, they tell Warlord Lon that they want him to join the Coalition and bring stability to the universe, but basically tell him it's the only option if he wants peace. And when the team prepares to answer a distress call from Lon's supply ships, Shiro says,
"We still need to process all the Galra and prepare the planet to continue operating on its own."
Despite the fact that the planet was already operating on its own long before Voltron showed up, which implies that all the Galra on Lon's base are being treated like prisoners. Given that Seasons 4 and 5 show that Allura is the de facto leader of the Voltron Coalition, it creates the sense that if she doesn't get unstuck from the anger phase of grief, then she'll ultimately end up making that villainous Altean Empire a reality in her own universe. This is why the team's alliance with Lotor in Seasons 5 and 6 was so important, because he was the only person shown thinking long-term about the future of the Galra people and their relationship with the rest of the universe. He had a tangible plan to render the Empire's justification for conquering and occupying other people's worlds obsolete so that he could withdraw his people without backlash, as well as proven methods of reducing the harm the Empire was inflicting in the meantime. So by allying with him and helping him take the throne of the Empire, Allura and Team Voltron were actually able to make a significant stride toward long-term peace for the universe instead of a future of constant warfare. Because with Lotor as Emperor proper instead of Emperor pro tem, he now had the authority to order and enforce a cessation of hostilities against the Coalition, meaning that the Rebellion now only had to worry about fighting renegade Galra splinter factions like Sendak's Fire of Purification instead of the entire Empire. And by helping Lotor advance his plan of harvesting quintessence directly from the Rift, the Paladins acquire a tool to help further de-escalate hostilities with those factions. Because once Lotor achieves access to the quintessence field, he'll be able to offer those rogue Galra warlords a metaphorical carrot instead of just the stick that is Voltron. On top of that, having Voltron work alongside Lotor in Seasons 5 and 6 helps to reassure the average Galra who's not already a Voltron-allied Blade agent or a die-hard Zarkon loyalist that there is a place for people like them in the universe that the Coalition aims to build. That their fate in a post-Empire world won't look like execution, prison, or the brainwashed slaves in Season 3's alternate reality Altean Empire. But because Allura has pushed herself to hide her emotional vulnerability to be strong, and because she's focused on the idea of never being helpless again, she's not prepared to navigate a situation that demands stopping to think instead of immediately taking action, like the mess the team finds themselves in during the second half of Season 6. Where after successfully helping Lotor get access to the quintessence field, Allura finds out that not only have there been more Alteans out there all along and he never told her, but that he's allegedly been murdering them systematically for generations. Meaning that from Allura's perspective, not only was she once again doing nothing while her people were being slaughtered by a Galra Emperor, but that she was helping said Emperor achieve the power to continue inflicting her people's fate on others. And the timing of Lotor's former generals abducting him from the castle after his supposed deception was revealed only served to reinforce that feeling by making it look like he really had been using her the whole time. Especially given the fact that 3 seasons ago, he deliberately used their desire to help people and Allura's desire to find other Alteans in order to advance his own goals. I've already outlined in previous videos all the evidence that Romell was at best jumping to conclusions and at worst actively dishonest about what was going on at the Altean colonies. But even if there was a shred of truth in her accusations against Lotor, the fact that the Paladins immediately jumped to taking Lotor down as the solution, without even bothering to investigate or listen to his side of the story, is ultimately what cost Allura her boon, in the process burning down everything that she'd spent the whole series working toward. Working so closely with Lotor meant that the Galra Empire now knew where all the rebels and Blade of Marmora agents were based in order for Lotor's forces to help coordinate with them. So when Voltron left Lotor to die in the Rift, it gave Unnerva the motivation to destroy everything they built, as well as a hit list of who to kill and where to find them. Meanwhile, Lotor's absence from the throne and Unnerva's subsequent massacre of any potential claimants at the next Krul's era causes the Galra Empire to shatter. Because with her druids being wiped out in the process of exterminating the Blade of Marmora, and Unnerva herself having written everyone off to go focus on the Altean colony, there was nobody left who could refine the raw quintessence the Empire mined into a usable form, which caused all the different Galra factions to lash out and go to war with each other over the resources they still had left, with the rest of the universe caught in the crossfire. Then Hagar sent all the Galra forces loyal to her to invade and occupy Earth as part of her revenge against the Paladins. And on top of all that, Allura's hasty need for action and portraying strength causes her to lose the few reminders of Altea that she still has left. She had to destroy her castle to close the tears that Voltron's fight with Lotor opened in the fabric of reality. She had to break her crown so that the gemstone could be used as a power source for Shiro's new robot arm. And finally, come Season 8, she's faced with the news that the surviving Alteans, the last of her people and culture, hate her and consider her their enemy because of what she did to Lotor. By the start of the final season, she's even more cut off from her home and people than she was at the start of the series. So after her falling out with Lotor, Allura spends the entirety of Season 7 and the first few episodes of Season 8 in the awakened to feelings of spiritual aridity stage. Because after they defeat Lotor, she finds herself lacking in direction and purpose. She spends all of Season 7 letting the rest of the team call the shots on where to go next. Once they return to Earth, the humans are all reunited with their families and get to take a breather once the planet's been liberated, making her self-imposed need to be strong for the sake of morale obsolete. And when she proposes going after Unnerva or investigating the Altean colony, she caves to the team's objections and their desire to focus on other priorities. Then in what is now Season 8, Episode 8, Clear Day, Allura's dream sequence and the setup at the end of the episode was very blatantly telegraphing that it was intended to be the start of the initiation and descent stage. Allura experiences a dream sequence where first Lance and then ultimately Lotor tempt her to absorb the Rift entity responsible for Unnerva's transformation into Hagar so that she can use its power to help her defeat the witch. Then when Allura touches the creature's container in her dream, the vision changes to her mother greeting her on Altea, telling her that she's arrived just in time to save them all as a Galra warfleet rains laser fire down on their planet. Allura then finds herself in the cockpit of one of Unnerva's Altean mechs, and with no sign of hesitation or contemplation, immediately drains the quintessence from her surroundings in order to destroy the warships overhead. After a brief moment of satisfaction at her success, Allura looks around and discovers that she's drained the life out of everything and everyone in her immediate vicinity, including her own mother. While Allura is horrified by what she's done, her mother praises her and expresses pride in her decision as she crumbles to dust before Allura wakes up. Then when Allura absorbs the Rift creature in the real world, she experiences a vision of Lotor beckoning her to follow him. As I've outlined repeatedly in previous videos, the next episode opens with Allura waking up after spending 2 days unconscious, now knowing exactly what she needs to do in order to enter Unnerva's mind and learn how to defeat the witch, and with multiple visual and writing details which indicate that she learned this by spending those 2 days unconscious traveling inside Lotor's mind and learning about his past. When combined with her mother's reaction in that first dream sequence, the setup was there for Allura to empathize with whatever circumstances Lotor had been operating under at the Altean colony, and recognize that she would have made the same choices if she had been in his position. Because when you look at the series as a whole, Lotor is clearly positioned as Allura's animus. His refusal to trust others with his secrets and vulnerabilities that I talked about in my breakdown of his character is just a more extreme form of Allura's attempt to bury her grief in order to be strong for others. So by learning why Lotor made the choices he did, Allura would have learned to recognize and make peace with the same traits within herself. Which, given the lines and visuals I've pointed out in previous videos, that only make sense if she was supposed to unfuse him from his mecha and rescue him from his mother's mind control, would have culminated in her literally healing his mangled body. Symbolically healing the wounded masculine by physically healing the personification of her masculine traits. And while the actual content of Allura's descent was cut, her behavior in the episodes immediately after Clear Day is incredibly consistent with the healing the mother-daughter split stage. Because when Allura emerges from her 2-day coma, she is confident and self-assured, trusting her instincts without letting anyone else talk her out of what she knows needs to be done. Something that is best illustrated by the contrast between Lotor accusing her of being afraid to use the powers at her disposal during their fight in Season 6, and her persistence in using every resource she has to defeat Onerva without letting either of her father figures' fear of the unknown hold her back from taking necessary risks.
All the power in the universe at your fingertips, and you still fear using it!
I'm not going to be afraid to use the power I have.
After Allura healed Lotor, the integration of masculine and feminine would have occurred when he joined Voltron in fighting against his mother during the final battle, based on all the lines and evidence for it that I've pointed out in multiple previous videos. Which, as I talked about in my last video, would have likely culminated in Lotor unlocking his dormant magic potential and joining Allura in healing the damage that Onerva did to the multiverse, symbolizing the balance that Allura achieved inside herself by not only having her and Lotor ending the series on the same side, but by working together to bring about a new dawn for the multiverse by recreating everything anew as essentially the god and goddess of the multiverse. All of this is why I and my friends over at Team Purple Lion are so confident that the plotline of the final season that I outlined in my previous video was the intended endgame of the storylines the writers were building up over the previous seasons. Because when you look at the structure of the entire series, it's clear that Lance's line in Season 4 about how Allura is the heart of Voltron is not just an inspirational speech about how she brought the team together, but a frankly pretty meta statement about her role in the show itself. Allura's journey and her grief over the loss of her people are what ultimately drive the overarching narrative of Legendary Defender forward. And when you lay everything out like this, it's crystal clear that her character arc lines up with the stages of Murdoch's outline for the heroine's journey. So when the final steps of her arc are ripped apart by World Events Productions meddling in the final season, to the point of abandoning the framework right as we're getting close to the climax, the show metaphorically broke the spine of its own coming-of-age narrative. Everything in the series was ultimately connected to Allura's coming-of-age story in one capacity or another, so when that thread was pulled, everything else that was even tangentially tied to it came unraveled. And instead of Allura learning to empower herself and getting to rebuild what she lost, she instead is left symbolically trapped in childhood and, through her death, literally unable to grow. Thank you all so much for watching. As usual, if you have any thoughts, observations, or counter-arguments about anything I've said here in today's video, feel free to share in the comments below. Like always, be sure to click subscribe if you want to be notified the next time I upload, and I'll see you all back here again on May 27th for my next video.